The purpose of today's session and what prompted it, some of the recent conversations that have been coming up on social media and in other venues about people experiencing racism and hate in our community. For any of you who are in the Kenmore Neighbors group, you may have seen some of those or come across some of those. What I found to be particularly interesting were the comments in the thread. You know, everything from surprise to people saying like, this has happened to me too. This is a normal thing, like especially for people of color in our community. And so it seemed to me that there was kind of a big disparity between what people think goes on and what is reality. And so we thought this might be a good opportunity to share more examples of what it's like to live as a person of color here in the North Shore area. Our hope today was just to listen to neighbors and community members who've experienced these situations, and then to start thinking about afterwards how we might be contributing to this system, both intentionally or unintentionally, and what we might be able to do to change that in preparation for our next session. We wanted to give you a quick overview of North Shore Social Justice Action Group, like who we are, a little bit of what we do, and why we're the convening group for this listening session today. So we're a group of residents, primarily from Kenmore, that basically had a similar goal of wanting to support BIPOC-led groups and individuals. And we all had personal reasons for wanting to do that work. And then we got connected about a year ago. And we've been meeting on a approximately monthly basis for maybe the past 6 months and holding public meetings. And there have been several instances in our community where we've heard people have experienced potential hate crimes, discrimination, potentially racist attacks. And we thought this might be a good opportunity to discuss this more widely, bring it to the open, and see if we could discuss possible solutions to make our community safer. Just to give a little bit of background about me, I am a mother. I have 2 kids, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. I think this matters a lot to me, having grown up as an Asian American in the US. I think growing up, I always assumed that racism was sort of just part of life, like something you just have to deal with if you're not white in this country, and that you sort of just develop an armor for when those situations happen, and you kind of slough it off and continue, moving on with your life. But what I realized is it's much more than that. It's sort of baked into our culture and our history. And I don't think we have to deal with it. We don't have to let it continue as the status quo. And so that was my interest in getting involved and helping to form the North Shore Social Justice Action Group, so that we can make things better for our current community and future generations. I work in higher ed administration as my professional career. I'm also a Kenmore City Council member, and I'm just really interested in the power of community members getting together. I think we have so much power if we work together and can do a lot of good. So I'm really excited to have all of you here with us today.
So I'm Anja Helmon. I'm the pastor at Northlake Lutheran Church in Kenmore. I also live in Kenmore. I am, before I was a pastor though, I worked at Microsoft for 10 years. And before I worked at Microsoft, I was a high school teacher for 3 years. And I just wanted to say briefly that I really did not have, I did not really get or understand how impactful racism is, or how much it still exists, basically, for most of that time. My dad was a huge civil rights activist, and he used to try and sit me down and lecture me and tell me all about this, and he was trying to open my eyes to the racism that was around us. And I just never really got it. It wasn't until in seminary that my eyes started to get a little bit open to some of the stuff going on because of some of the classes that I was taking. And even then, and then as a pastor, as I started to talk with people and have more exposure to what other people were experiencing, my eyes started to open a little bit more. And then I now foster 2 kids of teenagers who are actually refugees from Africa. And it was really having them in my life that helped open my eyes even more. So I am still learning, but I have become much more aware of the racism that surrounds us than I used to be. And so this has become quite a passion for me personally, and really wanting to help others start to kind of see what's going on. It's like there's a whole world that I just wasn't even aware of because I'm white and I don't have to be aware of it. So so just thought I would start us off with that, and I think you're going to hear a little more about the rest of the folks who are part of Northshore JAG later.
Before we get started in our discussion, we were hoping to hear from all of you, and you could put your responses into the chat or feel free to unmute and just speak. We have such a small group here that we can do that easily, I think. And so we're wondering, have you heard stories of racism here in the North Shore area?
I can tell you one that I thought was pretty blatant. When Miles was in high school, my nephew, Kenmore, the principal, the vice, and the two vice principals were looking out a window, and they're looking toward the classrooms. My nephew, who is Japanese, came out of a classroom to go to the bathroom. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole thing right now, but just give you an idea. He went to the bathroom, he went back to study hall. Now, that's all he knows, right? The vice principal came in and she says, "Get up, get your books, you're getting out of here." I mean, just really in front of the whole class. I mean, really, he didn't know what was going on. But she got him in the office and sit there, don't stand up. And a girl came by and says, "Boy, you're in big trouble." Now, he doesn't know what's going on. And so she came in and confused and accused him of dealing drugs. He checked his backpack. He still doesn't know what's going on. Well, apparently, the guy was in the bathroom, like a Hawaiian type guy, and same color. And he was in the bathroom at the same time. So he was supposed to be off campus at noon, and which he's going to go after he went to the bathroom. Well, Miles didn't see him. Of course, he just went to the bathroom and left. Well, they accused him of dealing drugs because he was in there at the same time as another guy of his color. Now, Miles has never gotten any trouble, got a good high grade point, good student, no problems. But they accused him and suspended him. And that was just because of his color. I guarantee it, because I went in with his mother. And of course, his mother, when Miles tells her, he says, "Well, they got me in the office." She says, "What did you do wrong?" Like as if he did something wrong. So we went in Monday, and they swear that they said that, well, some of these don't have doors. So he knew who was in there. And I went right immediately down there, and there was a door there. So that was just a place that had to be. There's no other way I could construe that except as racism.
I really wasn't very aware of a lot of racial injustice issues kind of until about 2016. And not to say that I hadn't thought about it or hadn't, but a very high level, and hadn't really dove deep into it until about 2016. And I went to a workshop by Robin DiAngelo. And the thing that kind of pivoted me was she posed the question about, can men take away women's rights? And I'm thinking, well, hell no, this is, 2016. And then she showed sort of like, this is who the history of our presidents have been. And it's all these white men. And here's the history of who our Congress has been. And it's primarily white men, a few women, and a few people of color. Here are all the governors in the US. Here are our current Senate. And just kind of showing, here are the people that run the Fortune 500 companies. Here are the people that run the publishing houses that tell all the stories. Here are the people that run Hollywood. And it was just all these white men. And I think that was kind of what pivoted me to really looking at, oh shit, there really is the people that are writing the laws for them, and the people that are telling the stories are telling their stories in their perspective of other people, not the people themselves telling their own stories. That was kind of when I shifted. One of the incidents that was in Facebook took place on a corner right by my house. And that was, I was thinking when I kind of started getting more active in racial justice stuff, I was like looking out into ways to get involved in this national conversation that was going on, or at the national level. And it's like, no, there's stuff right here and it's everywhere. And kind of waking up to that. And also just this last week, my wife was at Rite Aid, and she's standing in line, and the police come in and they surround this man of color that's at the register, and are like, we need to talk with you outside. And he's like, can I finish buying my stuff? Like, that's got to wait. And they take him outside and they start to question him because he looked like a guy that had been in a fist fight. And so like, and I think about, like, I'm sure the description was, a Black man. And so any Black man that's in that area kind of suddenly becomes suspect. I think since kind of waking up to that a little bit, I'm hearing a lot more and noticing a lot more, and being struck by a lot more.
The other day, I think, was it in the Northwest Justice Group? Hey, there were 2 Black men who did something, and there was like no other description. It's like 2 Black men. So that doesn't have people anything to go on. So, okay, 2 Black men. So of course, in the store, any Black person around might be brought in.
Yeah. And I like, and if you switch it up, it's like, would you just say like, oh, 2 white guys ran from this scene? And so suddenly, well, great, let's go look for every white guy.
Was it Angela? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Jennifer Anderson LaRue, who's on this webinar, had an excellent response to that.
It really got me going, and I'd been thinking about it for a while as I'd seen like posts on Facebook and about people who are acting suspicious, or like, I remember one a while ago that was like, there's a guy with a neon vest carrying packages around, but I don't see an Amazon van, so he must be stealing packages from the porches. And you're just like, but really, like, like there's no context for it. And this issue actually, I became more aware of it. I read the book Biased, and I don't remember the author's name right now, but I know her first name, Jennifer, because I share it. But she actually, there's a chapter in that book where she talks about having worked with Nextdoor, the social media company, about how they have changed how people are allowed to post about suspicious activity. And actually, I had posted as part of my comment asking the admins there to look at some of that criteria that like Nextdoor now uses before you post. They basically walk you through like, okay, like what was suspicious about this person? Like, what were they wearing? What does their hair look like? Like, what is their body type? So that you don't just get posts that are 2 Black men ran away from this car and they're suspicious. And I'm actually still trying to have conversations with the admins of that neighborhood group. Yes, Biased by Jennifer Eberhardt, of that neighborhood, because they have post approval on, they have the capacity to not allow those posts to go through. I'm still trying to have a conversation with them about being more thoughtful about what they allow to be posts, since they have chosen to turn on post approval. And I was kind of mad that didn't just get taken down. It was eventually taken down. I don't know if the poster or the admins took it down a day or 2 later. That book, Bias, has a lot of good information in it about kind of how to go about these, just how we usually like interact in our everyday life. Like all of us have those bias, and like, right, instead of just thinking like, oh, 2 Black men, like, no, like take it, like, what were they wearing? Take time to pay attention to their height, take time to pay attention to, the things that really are going to stand out on someone. Like, they're, do they have like neon yellow shoes or whatever that is?
I wanted to give some of the other North Shore Social Justice Action Group moderators an opportunity to introduce themselves. Hillarie, would you like to?
My name is Hillarie Windish. If you hear kids in the background, because my kids are playing in the background, I apologize in advance. I've been thinking a lot about how I came to this group, and I would say that really maybe 10 years ago, when Barack Obama, I'd have to do the math, but whenever Barack Obama was elected, I really thought, wow, we're really coming somewhere in this country. I was so proud the day that he was elected, because I've always thought that I wasn't racist and that I didn't act that way. But I also had this idea in my head that we were coming somewhere in the country, and that things were becoming more equal and more safe, and that we were going in a good direction. And I allowed myself to be blinded to what people of color experience in their lives, and how people of color have to go about their daily lives. And I would say, even when things happened, like Rodney King, I was like 13, so maybe that's not a good example, but as those things happened, I still allowed myself to not hear it, and hear that people didn't feel safe and couldn't be safe in their daily lives. Like many people, when everything happened with George Floyd last year when he was killed, I started to really take a look at what was going on, and really start to internalize that my bias was wrong and that I just wasn't seeing it. It's not that it didn't exist, it's just that I wasn't seeing it. And so I wanted to try to help and make positive change if I could. And I stumbled upon the other people who were putting this group together. And I was really lucky and fortunate that I was able to start examining my biases within myself, and start working with this group to join in, and hopefully making positive change. I also have 2 kids. I live in Kenmore. My kids go to Kenmore Elementary, and in my normal life, I have a full-time job, and I teach karate, and probably see everybody in the community, but and I think that's an issue that I've had, is my life is so busy, and I allow myself to get so involved in my life that it's been a real effort, and I have to make that effort to make space for these kinds of meetings, and trying to make positive change in myself and potentially in the community.
When we talk about calling in people in the community to this work, I would definitely count myself as somebody who needed to be called in. Last year, I was realizing I was posting a lot about politics on Facebook, and making lots of comments about how bad the situation was under Trump, and in the UK as well with Brexit, and just looking at things like that. But then when George Floyd was murdered, I came to the realization that I had been posting nothing about racism and the impact of racism, and that was a shock to myself, and it made me look at myself and think, well, why is that? Because it clearly is a problem, but why am I not thinking that it's a problem that I need to be involved with in terms of helping people with the help that they need, I think is the important thing. So being very careful about words. I don't say anything that would suggest white saviorism, because that's definitely not what we want to do as a group, and not what I want to do personally as well. But we do want to be involved, and we want to call people in and look at our own biases, as Hillarie was saying. And I think part of that is, somewhere I thought that racism wasn't a problem here, that in Northshore it wasn't a problem. And I think one of the stories that I heard that changed that, and one of the reasons that I'm very interested in listening today to the community, is we went down when Pastor Anja and the team had set up the walking vigil last year, with all of the names of people who've been murdered by police, people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, listed out. One of our friends was maintaining the signs, and she shared that often they had to go and put new signs in because they were being vandalized and thrown away. And my immediate assumption was, oh, well, that's teenagers, right? Just being teenagers doing silly things, and had to be told, well, no, actually, people are actually really angry that we have these signs up, and that we're pointing out this fact of white supremacy and the terrible tragedies that have happened to people of color and Black people and Indigenous people in this country. And that was an initial wake-up call to me. I've seen other things since the incident that happened with Fennell in the planning committee meeting, where her lived experience was basically just run over by someone, a white person who just didn't want to hear that was her experience of living in Kenmore. Those kind of things, but I still need to be called in. I think as a group we're aware of that as well, being called in, which is why I'm really interested to hear other stories from the community today and in the next session.
Jolene asked me to share a little bit more about this thread that I had alluded to earlier, but recently there was a thread on Kenmore neighbors. A neighbor that lives in the Arrowhead neighborhood, Indian American, I believe, and her nanny, who's Latinx, was walking their child in a carriage around the neighborhood. And someone who was driving by, a white middle-aged woman, I guess, rolled down the window and yelled at the nanny, like, "Go back to your country." And that really shook the nanny. She went, "Oh," and she said, "I know where you live," also. So sort of like yelled at her, told her to go back to the country, and then threatened that she knew where she lived. And so, of course, that really shook the nanny, and she was scared. She didn't know if she could go back to her home because perhaps that woman might follow her or know where she lives. And so she kind of stayed in the place and then eventually went back home and relayed the story to the mother, who posted on the Kenmore Neighbors group. And the thread had like 380 people respond to it. A lot of people, you know, said like, "This isn't Kenmore. We're sorry that didn't happen to you. You know, we're sorry that happened to you, but this is in our neighborhood. You know, that stuff doesn't happen very often. Or I've lived here for X number of years and that nothing like that has ever happened to me." You know, and then if you go through the thread, you can kind of sort of read between the lines that there were a lot of people, especially people of color, who commented and said like, "Yes, that's happened to me," or "That same thing happened to me, you know, before," or, you know, "This stuff does come up, like, sorry that happened to you, but, you know, most people in our neighborhood are generally kind and welcoming, etc." It really highlighted that disparity for me as I was going through the comments, like how people's perspectives and views and experiences can be so different in our neighborhood. Additionally, there were a lot of, like, I think really well-intentioned, well-meaning comments suggesting that maybe they might call people in the neighborhood if they want someone to walk with them, to accompany them, for them to feel more safe. And while I can appreciate that it was well-intentioned, my immediate thought was, that's not sustainable. And who can call a neighbor to come walk with them every time they want to go walk safely in their neighborhood? And then the other thing I was thinking about are the systems that we've put in place locally. The city instituted the Safe Places program, which happens in the commercial area downtown, but a lot of people walk in their neighborhoods where they're surrounded by other residences. So those, you know, those are not directly easily accessible in those instances. So my mind has been thinking about what can neighbors do to make it safe, so that if someone's out walking and they're attacked or they experience something like this, what is really realistic about like helping someone in that situation. So next we wanted to turn it over to Jolene.
Howdy, I'm Jolene Jang. I talk about the power of curiosity to innovate, usually for tech companies. But I switched my efforts to pour them all into Stop Asian Hate, because I cannot stand to see Asians being stabbed every other day. I have created, in order to reduce this problem, I have created Empowered Asians, a safe place for Asians to talk and to encourage them to share and speak up. And Asian Allies is a place for non-Asians to get involved, to learn about it, and to speak up and to use privilege, and so we can work as a team. I'm publishing many videos and soon to be podcasts, so people can start to understand and hear Asian voices and try and connect to see that we are humans too, and we deserve some rights as well. What kind of world do you want to live in? America is a dangerous place. Hate is exploding everywhere. Asian Americans are being spit on, yelled at, urinated on. They're being hit with bricks and hammers and stomped on and shot dead while people are unaware of this. I still believe that if you knew this was happening, that you'd do something about it. Your support will amplify Asian voices and untold stories like this, so people will know and can choose to do something. We need non-Asians to speak up. Join us to create safe neighborhoods. You can make a difference. Your contribution through Patreon will support videos and podcasts spotlighting Asian experiences. Don't wait. Stop the hate.
I grew up in Kenmore, went to Bothell. My dad, who spoke up earlier, he's class of 59, Bothell High School. He's one of the old timers, still alive. But I went to Inglemoor, so this is my neighborhood too. And by the way, my Chinese grandfather had a pancake house here in Kenmore. They're one of the very few minorities. So I am Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish. I'm fourth generation in America. And so when you're thinking about Asians, it is a very complex situation. I am mixed and fourth generation. And so I only speak English. I can speak sign language a little bit, and I have a little bit of Spanish. My parents also born here. They speak a little bit of Spanish, but when people are saying go back to your country, it's like, well, what country? This is the only country I know. And same with my parents. So that's just something to think about. And I'll be speaking from my point of view, which I'm Asian, so I'll be speaking from an Asian lens now. But what I'm talking about is to share with you about that there is hate here, and the example is Asian hate, but certainly there is hate everywhere. And when we make it safe for everybody, for Asians, it's going to be safe for other people. We have certain things, but it's more about the community coming together to meet each other and to show that everybody is welcome. And so this is what I've been doing, full-time volunteer work, 16 hours a day, because I cannot stand to see Asians being stabbed every other day. And it is local, even though you don't know about it. Oh, I want to show a picture of my grandfather. This is in Kenmore. On the Kenmore Heritage site, my dad is very involved in that. And I designed the website here. And so they have stories of old people from Kenmore. Why don't you know about anti-Asian hate? The news doesn't cover it. The reason that I jumped on board here is because Atlanta covered. So we all got the national news, and then we got the granny, and there's the mainstream news covered about 5 to 7 events. Then it kind of went away. And so the news is a business. We have to remember that. We have 6% Asian Americans. And here's the thing, who cares about Asians? Right? If you're not connected to one, and even if you are, you still may not care because it's just hard to relate to us. And then if you think, all right, well, 3% are immigrants. So you have 3 Asians who might be watching American TV. As a company with media, you need people to watch and to share and to engage. And so that is not going to happen with 3%. That doesn't represent money to them. And so the news doesn't cover. Through all my research with 16 hours a day for the last, I think this is day 99, I am also taking in Asian resources, the Asian American news, as well as 275 Asian panels of Asians being very raw, sharing. And a lot of it are people with platforms because they need to. People are dying. Asians are dying way more than you know. And so I'm listening to Hollywood and the newscasters, and you hear the newscasters talk about how they have to fight to get an Asian story in there. They have to fight really hard. One of them, Richard Liu from MSNBC, he says, once a year, I knew that I could have one story. I'd fight for that one story to talk about Asian American. People don't talk about it. Again, it's not popular. It's awkward. People do not want to feel awkward. They want to talk about the weather or something positive. Let's just bring light. And so they don't want anybody to feel awkward, and they don't want to feel awkward themselves. So they just avoid it altogether. Asians, how come Asians don't speak up? Well, when we do, we're gaslit. People don't believe us. Oh, that didn't really happen to you. That probably didn't happen. And you're just imagining, or you're just sensitive. It is against culture, Asian culture. And I will say blanket statement, whatever, 48 countries, entire continent, we can categorize that as it is Asian culture, because with Asian culture, it's the collective, it's a team thing. Don't stand out in America. Stand out, be an individual, be yourself, be different. That is not the Asian culture. You have the first generations who will never feel like they belong here, and they may not have the command of the language. There are so many reasons Asians will not speak up, and also it's jarring, it's triggering. I am 4th generation, and I have an American name. I do not have an accent. So I have a lot of advantage, and I wasn't abused. I wasn't bullied. I'm one of the very few. So I have more capacity to do this kind of work, and so I shall. So this is from the census of visual. So 60% white, 12% black, and 5.6% Asian. I can try and empower as many Asians to speak up as possible, but it still won't even matter because people are still not listening to us. My goal is to share with you all here on the call and the videos, and have you share with other people that 60% white there's a lot of power here to be able to participate and to make a difference. And I just threw this up here on the screen with the Stop Asian Hate, with that nonprofit to track the Asian hate crimes, because there isn't something like that official, but this is the nonprofit one. Washington State was number 3, California, New York, and Washington. Yet we never hear about anything. This is a complicated situation with the news, with Asians not speaking up, et cetera. And I think these numbers have changed quite a bit, but just know, even though you don't hear about it, it's there. I also want to draw attention to see something, say something. Well, we've heard this at after our 9/11, et cetera. At minimum bar, low bar. If you see something, please say something, but that should be the minimum. Here's the thing, just like in our neighborhood, like on that original thread, we're not going to see anything. And you as a white person likely will not know about it. You are not the target. So you're not going to see anything. Likely, people of color probably will not tell you. They don't want to be a burden. They also want to fit in. They've tried, I'll speak for Asians since that's my lens, but Asians likely are not going to talk to even their best friends about it because their best friends say, nah, you're fine, or it's not a big deal. And I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of Asians, and there's Asians who reach out to me because I'm the only safe person, the person who can support them. Their family, their spouse, their best friends don't feel safe with them. And so see something, say something. Please know after this presentation that there is hate happening all over the place, even though you don't see it, and we have to be proactive about it. You can't solve a problem if you can't understand it. So I'm going to do my best to explain it to you and hope you are open to listen. And there are a ton of resources, thousands, and do what you can. The smallest efforts of just talking about it, that's very helpful. Think about this. Has there been a time, whether you're traveling or going to a new place, where you got off the train or the bus, or maybe you're driving somewhere and you're like, oh, I am not, this is foreign territory, and I look like I stick out like a sore thumb. It's getting darker and you don't belong there? Try and think of something like that. And I think of New York when I did a lot of gallivanting around and different places, and the cops were like, you need to go home. There was a cop in every corner. They're like, before sundown, you should leave right now. And so try and imagine what that feels like, and think about it. Have you felt like that here in your neighborhood? Or can you just walk outside? I want you to think about that, because for many of us Asians, we don't feel safe to walk outside. And for many, it's who are going to, it's thinking about it. It's how, like Angela had mentioned, we may need to call somebody up. That's something that you may take for granted. And I always did until I was taught otherwise, with examples, which I will share with you. So expressions of hate, at least I see the ones online where, people are being thrown on the train tracks, and there's like blatant, like hammer to the head, brick to the head, like violent crimes, but there is hate everywhere. If you were a person and there were signs like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate all these things that would say you do not belong here, you're a perpetual foreigner, and people can do whatever they want with no consequences, how would you feel? So I'm going to share with you a number of different things. And Asian folks who are with walkers and everything. This is, the recent 94-year-old who was stabbed. I think we mostly think of old Asians who are stabbed, which is every other day, but it's more than that. So this is in California, Asian flu. If I'm an Asian and I see this person like Asian flu, basically it says, you don't belong here. This is just a construction sign, and it says, start Asian hate. So just in your car journey, you're already seeing signs kind of everywhere you go. Here is where this young Asian girl went back to her car, and it says, kill China. It's urine. If that's me, I'm like, is anybody watching me? Is that person going to follow me home? Is anything else going to happen? And when you start to see a sign here and a sign here and a sign here, there's a lot of fear around, oh my gosh, tell me more. And so it's not just the urine cup. Yeah, we can just throw that away, but what's going to happen next? In Seattle, our international district, there was white nationalist stickers on the different pillars. Also instances, and you're going through the drive-through, and then this is for Ching Chong. Would you want to eat the food that you just bought that has ching chong on it because did they spit in it? This is in Texas. It says, my sister's 6th grade social studies class took a quiz today. Which one of these Chinese norms is true? A, it's normal for China to cut off someone's lips if they burp. B, it's normal in parts of China to get children 50 lashes if they steal a piece of candy. C, it's normal in parts of China to eat cats and dogs. So how great is that? This is modern day. By the way, this is something where you could help. There was a petition, and I'll share with you how that petition works. It takes about 15 seconds, and you could be part of that petition to make that stop. And it was remedied. And it was very easy. Didn't take much effort. This is in Florida, where this is an Asian board member. She was being called a communist because they're supposed to wear masks. And, you know, looking at this video, people were yelling and everything. It's just, it's sick. This was a physical letter sent to a widow of an Asian who was just killed. Now that Byung is gone, it's one less Asian we have to put up with. Watch out and pack your bags and go back to your country where you belong. Can you imagine you just lost your husband and now somebody is celebrating it? This is just recently. And this is to a nail salon. Hey, you nasty, ugly, smelly, disgusting pancake face, stir fry, blah, blah, blah. This basically has some offensive things. Where could Asians be safe? Is it outside? No. Is it inside? Is it getting some food? No. Assailants are using fire as a weapon. This young lady, she was wearing her backpack and it was lit on fire. And this 89-year-old grandma, 2 men lit her on fire.
This 89-year-old grandmother says she pulled her hair up so it wouldn't burn, then rubbed her back against the wall to put out the flames.
These 2 guys on this block, it was Hispanic and Asian. So the 2 Asians, their cars were torched.
So I just got hit in the head with a bunch of rocks. I don't know, since COVID, there's been like these new bicycle gangs, and bicycle gangs, it's like a pack of kids, and when I say kids, I don't know, 16, whatever, 16 years old, and they ride in packs on bicycles, and they cover the entire road, whether it's going the wrong direction or the right direction, and they don't move the cars or whatever. But I just rode by one, and they threw rocks at my head, literally like a chunk of rocks, and then I went down another half block, and I'm assuming there was like another 7 or 8 gonna meet up with their friends or whatever, and another one pegged my head with a rock. I mean, I didn't even say anything, like I just pretended it never happened, but like, what do you even do in that situation? Like, it's not worth it for that fight, but no, I mean, there was a policeman right there, and I was like, yo, these people just threw rocks at me, and they were like, yep, but.
There was an Asian lady on the subway, and this guy, he urinated on her, and other people just watched. Did you know any of this? And what do you think? And does anything surprise you? You can unmute yourself if you like to.
Nancy Hansen is my name. I have an Asian neighbor who asked me to take her to the store. At the time, there were some threats, maybe a few months ago. I can't remember the exact month. And it sort of made me surprised because I hadn't heard, I didn't know exactly why she was so concerned. I am now seeing that just based on all of the news articles that you explained just a minute ago, it's our news. We weren't hearing it. She was hearing it because she reads all the Asian news from both Japan and from this area. She's connected with the Asian group down in the south end of Seattle very, strongly, and she's been with Hiroshima to Hope as a lead on that for years. So she's really connected here, but she gets all of that news. And I didn't get the news. That was the difference. And so that's what I was just surprised when she called. And since then, I've been taking her to the store when I can, and just taking her to places where there's a large, like big Costco stores or whatever, where she goes. So
I do have stories about my favorite store, Costco, and they're not happy. Thank you for that. I listen to the mainstream news here, and I'm not piped into the Asian American news, but because I am mixed and I'm 4th generation, I break some stereotypes here and there, that I want to make sure that I could hear what other Asians are saying, what they're feeling, and different generations, different countries from different country origins. And so I do represent many, many, many. I'm hearing many voices. I wouldn't know of all I know until I studied it. And then I've also been listening and reaching out, and people, because I'm a person who's doing this work, they feel comfortable to share with me.
Jolene, I asked you this personally, but I want to ask again.
Yeah.
This kind of hate that's being experienced, I want to understand, is this connected to the pandemic, or has this always been in our background?
This rampant thing though, with massive, that is definitely new. But I think, you know, as my dad spoke, I mean, there's definitely hate all around, but the violence and the audacity for people to just be in a crowd and hurt people and know that nobody else is going to do anything. I have seen that over and over again. I would say this is way ramped up. It's very public right now and it's blatant. So massive right now. I mean, do stabbings really of old people just right now?
Have been hearing that Asian hate and violence against Asians is on the rise, but I think I hear that tagline, an occasional story. Hearing one story after the next is really impactful and hard-hitting. Like, my heart feels heavy and sad. And I also am aware of not just, you know, this is a different news source, and so I'm kind of one step away from it or protected from it, or it's not a news source that I seek out. But even when I'm on, you know, online and I'm scrolling, I am aware that now, like, I don't have to look at those stories. I can just keep on scrolling and not pay attention. The things that happen locally, you know, just like we had been saying earlier, like, I'm not a target, and I'm not gonna be aware that these things are happening. When Nancy was sharing that her neighbor called to her, and kind of what a wake up call, raised her awareness around that. I'm like, I kind of feel in that same boat. Like, wow, I didn't realize that it was this horrific. I mean, people being lit on fire. Ugh, how inhumane, how horrible.
Yes. And by the way, this is very Disney-fied. I'm not showing you the violent ones, and it is every day. This is every day. So I'm sparing you, but I wanted to give the different types of hate. Some of these are crimes, but plenty of them are not. So thank you for sharing. I think, Sharon, that you represent a lot of people who, you know, will do something if they knew. And that is my belief.
This is really hard for me, but I mean, I know I'm very aware, you know, I was really involved with the Black Lives Matter and all that stuff last summer. And, you know, I feel like I'm a, you know, a good liberal or whatever, and try to be aware of all this stuff. I honestly didn't realize, I never really thought about Asian Americans and how impactful, you know, and how everything that they go through. My niece is half Korean. My brother married a Korean woman in Korea, and so, but they live here in America now. And actually, my niece pretty much grew up in America, and she lives in San Francisco. And she's very, very active in, you know, all kinds of civil rights. And anyway, when there was that big mass shooting where that guy shot up a bunch of Asian Americans, I thought of my niece, but I didn't call her till 2 days after that happened. And I actually texted her, because the 20-somethings, they pretty much just text. And I asked her how she was doing. And she basically didn't reply for about 24 hours, which is sort of unusual. And then when she did reply, she basically just lambasted me. Very, very angry, really took out tons of her anger on me. And it's been very difficult, and it's still difficult. I replied, and I was very apologetic and very humbled myself, and said, I'm really sorry. And apparently when that happened, that shooting, it just really just devastated her. Like, she had to take a day off work, and, you know, she was really, really affected. And I hadn't realized. This is all very eye-opening, and I'm understanding more of why she's so angry, because if I had known, if the media covered this more, you know, I'd heard, like Sharon said, about the occasional horrific thing, you know, like an old man being pushed down and hitting his head and dying, and, you know, stuff like that. But it's it didn't sound like it was all the time, and it just wasn't really front and center in my life. And it is in hers, and I didn't really realize that. This is all very enlightening, and I appreciate you telling us this.
Thank you for sharing, Tracy. I quite certain you represent like most people where they didn't know and they're out there for BLM and LGBT and different causes, but Asians, we don't hear about it. And none of your Asian friends said anything. So it's probably not a big deal. And I just don't hear about it. And that's what the problem is. So that's why we are here. And I'm so grateful that everybody is here, because I feel like if you know, and you know how prevalent and how insidious this is, that you will do something. Briefly, if you think about the impact on Asians, I want to give you 3 things. Each time we see an Asian be stabbed or cut up, in a hacksaw and put in a plastic bag, and like every time we see somebody being hurt, it's like our parents. It's like so many. Each time we see an Asian person out there, because there's lack of representation in Hollywood, we don't really see that very much. So every time, unless it's a news reporter, we see one of our relatives. And so, Tracy, what you were mentioning, yeah, most of us feel that way. And I also talk to a lot of Asian women with their white husbands and their mother-in-laws and everybody, and they don't reach out. Many of us are angry because people still don't do anything. And there's lots of things you can do. And being on this call is a big one. Think about it. The other day I was trying to get some soccer in to get some of my anger out. And I saw this white senior citizen with a walker, and she's walking across the street. And I thought, what would happen if some perpetrator just shoved her over and knocked her over in the middle of the road? What would happen? I think a lot would happen. I think there would be sirens. I think a ton of people would come around. I think that the person who did it would be tackled and would be shunned and shouted at, and the police would take that person away. There'd be a lot going on. But it's different. It's different for Asians. When I was on a bike ride last week, I saw a big black garbage bag on the side of the trail. And what I thought of was the Asian man who was cut up into pieces with a hacksaw. And stuffed in a bag in a van. 3 young white men had chopped him up. That's what I thought of. Let's talk about transportation for Asians. It certainly depends where you are, but I've heard from many, many, many who have to change the way that they get to work. For example, in New York, it's definitely not subways, because people are thrown on the subways constantly, or there are attempts made, and lots of attacks and stabbings, beatdowns on the subways, and just how you have to walk around. Transportation is definitely hampered in different areas, as well as going to the park. I mean, that Olympiad was given a threat. The Olympiad. And then people, what was so disturbing to her is all the people heard him say what he said. They didn't care. And going to the park, that's something that, I don't do. I don't go unattended. And there are many people who do not, and who are also weaponing up. So the freedom to just walk outside your house, that's a freedom that some of us don't have. How do Asian parents speak to their children? Black parents need to give the talk to their kids. Hey, you're Black, and so people are going to hate you and accuse you of things. And usually Asians don't have to have that conversation. I have heard of that conversation with first generation Chinese. I've heard that, where you've got to work harder, people are going to call you names. But now they have to have a different conversation where, hey, I don't even know what that sounds like, but that's certainly transporting their kids so they're not hurt. And as well as, hey, people might want to attack you and your grandparents, and they might want to kill you. I mean, what does that conversation look like?
I'm scared they're gonna come back though, and I don't want them to come back.
7-year-old Amy can no longer sleep after 4 men broke into her parents' Oakland home at about 10:30 Tuesday night.
They say that if you do anything, the first person I shoot will be your daughter.
He and his kids, a 2-year-old and 6-year-old, were all slashed in the face. And being that Asian, in the Asian culture, we don't communicate very well in many of these situations. So that's a tough one. So there are many different daily impacts, and that's just a few. In summary, with all the different expressions of hate, which are insidious, through work, through school, through transportation, being able to walk freely, Asians are impacted. Some more than others, but soon to be many of us. And the more plugged in we are and are paying attention, oh my goodness. So to create a safe neighborhood, we absolutely need to trust. When people say something like myself, you need to believe us and be curious and say, tell me more about that. And how do you come to that? Because there's lots of news and a lot of things that perhaps we are privy to that you're not aware of because you are not the target. So this does take proactive effort. In this segment, I share with you a number of local hate crimes targeting Asians in our greater Seattle middle-class suburbs. But it's not only happening here, but it's happening in your neighborhood as well. Even if you don't know about it, even if the news doesn't report on it, and even if your Asian friends say nothing, it is happening. And if we want to create safe neighborhoods, we need to be aware and be proactive. He was in his car, and then 3 guys were saying, ching chong Chinaman, and, doing this, and, with their eyes like they were kindergartners. That may seem not like a big deal, like, oh, name calling. I don't think that's against the law. It's not a police issue. But what happens is for Asians, are kind of used to like being called names when they're a kid and all the way through adults. And it triggers a lot of different things. It says, you do not belong here. You are still not accepted. What would happen if my friend would have got out of the car and said, hey, what are you saying to me? What would have happened then? Mm-hmm. So there's a couple things going on, because I think a lot of people are like, big deal. People call me stupid all the time. I just let it slide off. But when you're talking about race, this is a different type of situation. And so that was Lake Forest Park, and this is in Alderwood. And the guy who reported this, just in this other group that I'm in, I think he's 30 or so. And his father was over at Alderwood with his headphones on and just kind of shopping around. And then a white high school kid was screaming at him and hit him over the head with a bottle. That kind of shook the father and the kid. And I mean, the 30-year-old, the kid. Last November, where my aunt, we had like a dinner over at my place, and she left, and she's 77 years old, and she drove almost immediately. A car followed her. And this is at night in the dark, and then followed her to her house. And she realized, okay, now she's in Kenmore, and this person is tailing her. And then she drove to Shoreline to my parents' house to try and like get them to shake off. And then, so after 10 minutes of being followed, then she, that stopped. There was a lady, a 72-year-old lady, who's been a neighbor of this Vietnamese woman, 33 years old, and many threats and racial slurs, and was kind of rocking back in your car. And, you be careful, watch out, etc. And so the police did come out, and she is charged. I don't know what kind of charge that is. The thing is, no matter what kind of police situation, this is a community situation. Police, first of all, can't always be there. And most of the time it's not illegal. And these things are like a slap on the wrist. They don't really mean anything. So this is a situation, and I found out about this on Nextdoor because an Asian actually posted this. And so these happen quite a lot. And on this thread, if you get interested down the line, you can see all the comments that turned kind of dark. They were positive, sympathy and this and that. And then they start getting into some other territory. And that's where we need allies. Instead of just Asians speaking up, like 2 of us, we need some other people to kind of jump in there and stick up for us, because it's all of our neighborhoods.
Noriko Nasu strongly believes she's a survivor of a hate crime. Today, she was clear in expressing how she feels ignored and wants action taken for justice.
On February 25th, I was attacked by a stranger in Chinatown in Seattle.
For the first time, in her own words, Noriko Nasu recalls the painful day she was brutally attacked.
He followed me and struck me in the face with what looked like a rock in a sock. He knocked me unconscious, leaving me with fractures in the nose and cheek, broken teeth, and concussion.
Police say Nasu was meeting her boyfriend in Chinatown International District the night of February 25th. The suspect, Sean Holdip, allegedly attacked her first, then her boyfriend. A month later, Nasu is still suffering from persistent migraines, dizziness, and brain fog.
All of this pain was nothing compared to what came next.
Nasu believes her case should be prosecuted as a hate crime, and the assault charge should be elevated.
If this is not a hate crime, then what is it?
This is a Kenmore resident, and he and his wife and his baby, they're Asians, were walking in their neighborhood, and a truck came from the other side of the road and came at them. I reenacted this so people can actually see it.
After dinner every day, we usually go on a walk around the block because with the kid, he likes it a lot. And we're walking up the street that's like right in front of our house, and we saw like this big white truck start driving towards us on opposite side of the street. Then about 100 yards out, he like swerved over to our side, and then he got closer and closer and closer. And so then we decided that we would need to walk in the grass, and then he basically slowed down like right as like he got within a foot of us, and then he's basically just gave us this like death stare as he was driving by us. This guy literally lives like 2 houses. And then, I mean, we saw him a couple more times when he was walking around his house, because I mean, he's our neighbor. And he always just tried to either ignore us or just stare at us, just really unfriendly, and just kind of going out of his way to like make it known that he doesn't want to have anything to do with us.
How does your wife feel?
Honestly, we've been talking about like this kind of stuff a lot. And I mean, she's like, well, maybe we should spend more time in Korea.
Yeah.
But maybe we should try to find jobs there.
How are your routines different now?
So when we go walking, like we won't go like walking by his house and it's like a little bit dark at all. We usually try to like avoid that street if possible. I mean, if it's super cold outside or if it's a little bit later, then we'll have to go like on our walk that's a little bit shorter. So we'll have to walk by his house. But I mean, we're just like really, we just try to pay attention to see if his car's there or not. Then if it's not there, then we make sure to just like watch out and be extra careful because we don't want to get hit.
When you leave the house and your wife is at home and your baby's at home, what are you thinking?
Oh, we don't leave the house very often anymore, but I mean, that's because of like past incidents that happened early in the pandemic, like when I got attacked on the bus. This is right after we moved to Kenmore, right after COVID started, like right out in the US. I was on my way back from work on the bus from Seattle. Mm-hmm. And then I just sat down in a seat because I was tired, and the bus ride was about 45 minutes long. And then about 5 minutes later, the guy next to me just started to stand up and start screaming at me, coughing on me, trying to push me. And the bus was packed at this point. And I just couldn't move. I couldn't get out. And he did this for about 25 minutes straight while everyone just tried to like avoid like eye contact. And then the very first stop that the bus stopped at, I was able to like there's people who got off the bus. I was able to stand up and move because like there was a guy who was Indian, and he saw what was going on. He's like, hey, you should come over here. It happened. And the next stop after that, like the guy who attacked me, like he just got off the bus and just started running.
You're a big guy.
Yeah, I'm 6'2" and 235.
How tall was this guy? What was his stature?
Oh, he was a short, skinny white guy.
Short and skinny.
Oh, I mean, maybe 5'10", I don't know. I mean.
Okay, anybody's short to you, probably. Okay. I was talking to a lady in Denver, a Japanese lady, and there were school kids mm-hmm. who were calling her names when she was gardening. Mm-hmm. And the idea that kids and just people who are so emboldened to know that there's no consequences, or to think there's no consequences. Oh, you had another incident too.
This was right before we moved up, like out to Kenmore, when we were living at that point, like out in Bellevue. And this is again right after everything started to come out with COVID. I was on the bus on the way to work, and there's this middle-aged white guy like sat down right in front of me, and our seats were like the seats that are on the side of the bus that face in.
Yeah.
He just started to glare out every single like Asian person on the bus. And then we got off at the same stop. He actually started following me. I usually, like when I got off the bus there, like I would walk through the Columbia Center, and then like walk like in the underground tunnel, and then like in order to get to work that way. But then so I actually walked around the Columbia Center. I walked up the big hill to my office, and he followed me the whole way, followed me into my building, and then he started. So then I'd hang around like the actual cop that was in the lobby. He started just pacing back and forth for about 5 minutes, and then he eventually left. And then I was able to get in the elevator to get to go to my office.
So
I mean, that was the scariest thing that happened.
So he followed you for 2 blocks and into your building and
Yes.
weaved around for you.
Yes.
What were you thinking when you got off the bus and then realizing he's following you? What was in your head?
I was hoping he wasn't armed, to be honest, and then I was just hoping to get into the office building as fast as I could, where there's an actual cop who just is in the lobby at all times.
Have you told anybody about this, and what are people's responses?
When I told people at first, people just didn't believe me.
Did you tell people who knew you?
Like my wife, my dad, my mom, like friends. They're like, that couldn't have happened. That doesn't happen. But I mean, COVID had just broken out, and like there wasn't Asians weren't getting attacked constantly at that point.
They're like, you're mistaking that didn't happen.
Yeah, like I don't believe it. It couldn't have happened, type thing. And then with the story when I tell it now, they're like, oh my God. And they're like, oh, this is the pattern that's been happening. It just happened at the beginning of the pattern, not at the end.
When people didn't believe you, what do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know what to think. I'm like, it's hard to not take it personally. It's just like people will believe what they want to believe. And I mean, people don't want to believe something's bad is happening. So
yeah, that is true. I think that's so typical of people like not wanting to believe. On the Empowered Asians group the other day, we were talking about, one of the guys was saying, you can't tell me how I feel. Because a lot of people are like, oh, that didn't happen, or you don't feel that way. It's like, nope, that was my story, and you are not in my head. You don't walk in my shoes.
Nope, that's basically what I feel. It's like, you can believe whatever you want. This is what happened.
The reason you stay home, I stay at home too, but the reason you stay at home is to stay safe. Yeah.
I mean, there's other things that happen. Like I've been coughed on at grocery stores a lot, and at Costco. Just get watch like mothers with their kids just like start to point me out and say, hey, you guys stay away from people like him. Just to like watch like parents like teaching their kids like actual racism without even knowing it, or without what hope is that they don't even know it at least.
Yeah, being from the same area, and our Costco's are definitely Asian too. That is surprising, and I believe you. But it's like, why would you pick on a big dude who could beat you up? I don't understand that.
So yeah, so I mean, like I actually had like a discussion with one of my friends in this area. He's like, dude, man, I told him what happened. I was like, I don't understand why it's happened to me. In particular, he's like, dude, you're a target. He's
yeah,
like,
but why are you a target instead of me? Well, I'm not leaving my house at all. So
like with guys, when they beat someone up, like, they want to be someone big. Like they want to be like, hey, I beat this guy up, and he ends up being like 5'2". They want it to be an accomplishment type thing.
My theory is that people see that there's no consequences.
Yes.
Whoever can just, yeah. But I did this interview with I've met a number of really strong, powerful people mentally and physically. And he's like, you know what? You may stumble upon a math Asian, but you may stumble upon a really badass Asian too. So I do know a number of Asians who are gunning up in our neighborhoods. It's super unfortunate, but it's tough. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, for us, we need other people to speak up.
Yes.
We're
like anti-gun also. So
yeah, I don't know how I am. I just know that I went shooting also recently because what are the options? And I'm not 6'2". It's like, I'm not for guns, but I'm not really against them at this time. Something you said earlier was something about being a human. Oh, because when you were in the Bay, you felt like a human.
Yeah, there wasn't much discrimination going on there towards Asians. It was just like, hey, there's a guy, his skin's a little bit darker, black hair. Who cares?
Yeah. Well, the idea that in nice little Kenmore, you and your wife had just even the thought of moving to Korea. I hope that opens up people's eyes that this is happening and to believe. And I'll be sharing more stories to get the word out. I want to believe that some people are going to at least believe and start doing something. We'll see. Now, this is a tough situation because this is a neighbor. This is a neighbor in Kenmore. But what can you do? He didn't break any laws. Nobody saw it. What are you gonna do? These are types of situations where as neighbors, we need to get to know our neighbors and talk about these things, because I bet you if you talk to your neighbors, they probably don't know much about that there's any anti-Asian hate in our place. This is another similar car situation. This is in Shoreline. And it was an Asian man who was walking. Now this way, they were going the same direction. And this lady in an SUV drove on the shoulder, and he and the dog had to jump out of the way in order to not get run over. Because of that car incident, she's gunned up. And I just want to let you know, we are weaponing up. I went shooting as well. I also I've done my research. I'm asking other Asians how they're weaponing up, because we have no way to protect ourselves. And weapons are mostly illegal, except for guns and some types of sprays. I kind of wanted to point out that this is severe. You know, we've seen so many times where people are watching people be hurt. And I mentioned I don't go out there either. I used to do 5 miles a day for 10 years, and 5:30 in the morning in the dark by myself with my headphones, zero care going on. But the 2 out of the 4 times I chose to go out there by myself, I had 2 situations too that were definitely questionable. And it's not worth it. And I'm trying to just localize this for you. I think we hear about Atlanta and a few other things, but these are just in our area. So this is in Bothell. You probably all heard about this.
Preston, Mary, this deadly stabbing happened in a fairly busy part of town. There are a lot of shops and restaurants here, as well as a handful of apartment buildings. I want to step out of the way to give you a closer look at this scene here. We were told that attack took place in the entryway to that building straight ahead, just behind that white van, the Villas at Beardsley, and that is where investigators have been focused on for much of the night. Let's show you some video from a little earlier. There was a crowd of people here moments after this all happened. As you mentioned, emotions, they were running high. This all went down at around 7:30 tonight, and as police showed up, medics were already here trying to save that man's life, but we're told he died at the scene. All we know about him is that he was 29 years old and that police have taken someone into custody, a 26-year-old man. I asked if a weapon was recovered. Police would not say, and right now they're working to get a better idea of just how this all unfolded. Officers speaking with witnesses.
Now we're trying to figure out exactly what happened, but there were several witnesses, as you mentioned, so that will help us get through our investigation quickly.
And a neighbor who lives around here tells me that both men lived in the same apartment building and that the attack itself was unprovoked. She tells me that the man who was taken into custody actually went back upstairs to his unit before being brought down by police. Now, as we come back out here live, the medical examiner from King County just left minutes before we came on the air. Investigators tell us they will likely be here at this scene throughout the night. We do hope to have more details for you tomorrow. Those are currently fairly limited as this investigation is in its early stages. Live tonight in Bothell, Cole Miller, Como News.
And tonight we received new surveillance video from Bothell police of the night of April 25th when John Nguyen was stabbed to death outside of his apartment. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joyce Taylor.
I'm Mark Wright. Good evening. So the suspect has been charged with second-degree murder. Asian American social groups are keeping a close eye on the investigation to see if this was racially motivated. King 5's Callie Greenberg live in Bothell with our story. Callie.
Mark and Joyce, these are the first images that we are seeing of at least part of the interaction between the victim, 29-year-old John Nguyen, and the suspect, 25-year-old Ian Williams. And we do want to warn you, some of these images, some may find disturbing. This is surveillance video from inside the apartment complex that both the victim and the suspect live in. Ian Williams, the suspect, appears to be outside on his phone when the victim, John Nguyen, exits with a group of people. According to court documents, Williams allegedly showed the middle finger to Nguyen. About a minute later, we see Williams appear to lunge at Nguyen. He runs back inside the apartment complex, pushing past several people who try to stop him. Nguyen died at the scene, and court documents say Williams ran into his apartment and told his mother he had been attacked by an anti-masker. But Asian American community members are rallying and have asked officials for hate crime charges.
I only heard about this like through one person. I barely heard about this. I'm curious to hear from Who all heard about this?
No.
The murder? You did not hear about the murder in Bothell?
No.
Oh gosh. Okay, so that is a problem. Let's discuss some of the things we talked about.
I think I shared with you before, and I shared on here that I have had, as a Buy Nothing admin, I have had people in our neighborhood reach out to me and share some experiences recently where they've either been followed or, like you said, like have been driven at or have been yelled at, where they're out in their neighborhood, maybe sometimes doing a pickup or whatever, but they've been in our neighborhood. And again, they're not comfortable sharing that publicly. But I am wondering, like, to take it the next step further, like what can we do? How can we help? Like, if we have the, we have the we're starting to have the awareness and learning that this is going on. Like, what are the next steps? Like, how can I help my neighbors?
Great segue. Talk about it and share that. Oh, I heard this. My friend who's Asian told me this. And I also heard this and I saw this and I didn't even know about it. Did you know about it? I wonder, and just start a conversation. I have all these resources too. If you want to spend 1 minute a day on this, great. You can make actually a big difference by reading an article and sharing it. If you are digital, sharing or video online and saying something about it. So very few people engage with Stop Asian Hate, that it's a big deal. And if we can normalize conversation about race, I mean, I don't like to talk about race, but I have to. People are dying. We have to start talking about it. There are many small things that you can do, and I suggest that you look by reflecting. Look in the mirror first. Start to learn some of these terms. Gaslighting. What is gaslighting? Terms like, I don't see color. Why has it got to be about race? Are you sure that happened? And I don't know. That probably was just one incident. At racial microaggressions. What are they and what do they sound like at work and in your neighborhood? Do you say any of them? What is the impact on the other side? Look at the racism scale and feelings of white guilt. Do you relate to any of these phrases? Where are you on this? Have you looked at your privileges? Have you listed them out? I recently learned a term called toxic positivity. It's when people say, oh, just don't think about it. Don't look at the news. Well, if you don't look at the news, you're denying reality. Just relax. Meanwhile, I'm looking at Asians being stabbed and murdered. Just relax. And you just got to think positive. We got to bring people together. We're all the same. That is not helpful. Toxic positivity is not only annoying, it is the opposite and anger provoking. Desmond Tutu says, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. But everybody is busy. I've put together a list of small actions you can take, and in this case, 2 minutes or less. If you have 30 seconds, you could sign a petition. Sign up for change.org and act to change. In 1 minute, you can change your Facebook frame. And what that will do is that will share with people Stop Asian Hate, where, what is that? Why did you do that? Is that a big deal? Tell me more. In 1 minute, you can share Asian voices. When you see the topic of Stop Asian Hate, you can post on it. You can validate them. You can share it. When you have 3 to 8 minutes, you can read an article, watch a news clip, watch a video. If you have 30 minutes or more, you can listen to an Asian American podcast. You could also listen to in double speed. And there are Asian panels. I've listened to about 275 of them, and I have them all listed. You can get bystander training. You can watch educational Asian American videos. I have about 80 Asian American videos that I have done. And you can read books about Asian Americans. There are so many things you could do to learn and to share. And there is time when you're doing laundry, when you are driving, when you're walking, there are ways you can use your ears. If you joined Empowered Asians or Asian Allies, we meet weekly as a drop-in if you can make it, but it's also a group. And I have a guide sharing with you how to learn, and we discuss these items. And I have sifted out the best videos and best articles, then we talk about it. So they're easy to process, and we share different ideas on how we're making a difference in our communities.
I also wanted to jump in, sorry, and just say that I think we would plan this as 2 sessions as well, right?
Yeah.
And so the second session is meant to be a brainstorming of what can we do. And we specifically said 2 sessions to give people time to be thinking and absorbing and considering everything that they've heard today, and to bring some ideas, because it is hard to figure out what is it that we can do. There's a lot of great links that that Jolene is sharing and that she's put into the chat, and a lot of other things that that we can be considering. A huge piece of this is also thinking about our own racism. What are the ways in which we are complicit? What are the ways in which we might be making the problem worse without realizing it? And we have to remember our own race, admitting or recognizing our own racism does not mean that we are intentional about it. It means that there is a bias, there is something in us. You know, what are the ways that we aren't noticing? What are the ways that we're just making excuses? We started with hearing the story about, I don't remember his name now, I hope he's still on the call, but there was a gentleman who was telling us about his nephew, how Inglemore High School, how they assumed that his nephew was the one dealing drugs when it was someone else, but because they're both Asian, you know, what are the ways that we hear a story like that and then maybe think, oh, well, maybe they're overreacting, or, well, you don't really know that there was racism there. Things like that, believing people's experiences. So I would say we need to start with ourselves, then let's move into and how can we be better allies, not just allies, but advocates, and not just advocates, but active anti-racists. And then let's meet again on July 10th. I think Angela just put it in the chat, and brainstorm the ideas that we have. And maybe we'll come up with things we can do individually, and who knows, maybe we'll come up with an idea we want to do as a group as well. Yeah, we heard a lot of stories of hate that's happened around the country. And we've heard some of things that have happened here in Kenmore. There are so many more of things that are happening here in Kenmore. I mentioned before, I have 2 foster kids. They're from Africa. They've experienced things. One of them at Inglemore, also a kid who kept calling him the N-word, kind of trying to fight with him. Eventually, when he did fight with him, the other kid's parents then called the police and wanted to press charges against our son, even though the other kid was the aggressor. And it was when the staff and police heard the whole story. I'm grateful that they did believe what our son told them, and they refused to press any charges. But there's a lot of kids who don't have that benefit. I go running all the time, and I run through neighborhoods all the time. Well, my daughter, who's Black, started running with me sometimes, and suddenly I started getting stopped and told we weren't supposed to be in that neighborhood. You know, that never happened before until she was with me. So there's things like that come up that I never would have experienced or seen if I didn't have these connections.
I did want to respond to the question that Jennifer posed earlier, and that is, when it comes to the solutions, it's going to be really important that the solutions are driven by and collaborated on by the people that it impacted. The thing that was sort of unsettling about that Facebook comment thread were all the white people who were suggesting solutions to the people who are experiencing racism without even talking to them about whether that was a good solution for them. So the people who are reaching out to you, I think that's great. You could probably suggest some ideas, but check with them on whether that would actually be helpful.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela. And I just wanted to also share, I know sometimes we're so well-meaning, we say, oh, well, I'll walk with you. But I want to point out that when we do that, in some ways, what we're kind of sending them, first of all, if you don't even know the person, and you're saying, I'm a stranger, but I'll walk with you, I don't know that it's that helpful to that person. If you know them well, then yes, absolutely, you talk with them and you say, how can I help? Would this be helpful? But by doing this, what we're now saying to them is, well, it'll be okay because I'll walk with you, when actually the issue is we've got to stop the hate in the first place. You know I don't want to have to call someone every time I want to go out for a walk. That would be incredibly burdensome and not the way that I want to live. So I don't want my neighbors of color to have to do that either.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to just share with you that I put out in my 99 days, I think maybe 70, 80 videos of Asian voices. So if you want to learn more about Asian voices, what are they saying? What are they thinking? Here's some.
Currently, all my time goes to creating resources and interviews and amplifying Asian voices and creating Asian allies so we together can save Asian lives. If you would like to support me in this, go to Patreon, Jolene Jang. Here are all of my social media links, and they're also in the description below. Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. We know your time is precious. We hope you all stay cool, and we hope to see you back with us on July 10th for our next session.
For those of you who want to stop Asian hate, let's go. Join in the Facebook Asian Allies group. We meet weekly and we talk about what we can do, current events, what you see from your lens, brainstorm on different ideas. And I think something important to know is that we don't have the answers. I mean, I have a few, but you don't have to know the answers. You don't have to have the history, but be willing to learn and to listen and to ask questions. And a few comments from you, a couple of validations from you can go a long ways. Most people do not engage with the hashtag Stop Asian Hate, so they pretend it's not happening. Well, I see these murders all the time. I can't just ignore it because I don't want all Asian Americans to just die. We need to speak up and we need your help. With 6% Asian Americans, we need the other 94%, some of them to say something. And your words, you may feel helpless, but your words and your participation goes a long ways. So we look forward to it. And I'll tell you, I've heard from a few of my friends that are like, wow, this is really interesting. And we are all learning along the way and making mistakes, and that's great. The problem is when people are just silent and do nothing. That's offensive. Doing something in order to make mistakes, we'll learn from that. So look forward to meeting you, and as a weekly program, and get active in the Facebook group.